Out here in the perimeter, there are no stars. Out here, we is stoned, immaculate.
Hello and welcome. This is the C86 show. I'm David Eastaugh. As you know, we love a special guest. This week it's going to be the turn of that Petrol Emotion, because I recently spoke to their guitarist and songwriter Raymond Gorman to find out more about life, love, poetry and all that other groovy stuff. That Petrol Emotion has just brought out a box set on Demon Records, which is titled Every Beginning Has a Future. It's an anthology from 1984 to 1994. It features 121 tracks over 7 CDs, all the studio albums and a live album, plus various B-sides remixes, and also a 52-page booklet which has sleeve notes from the respected author and journalist John Harris. Anyway, this is the interview, so after several minutes of casual but interesting chat, we get down to that exciting subject that was the early formative years. And after mentioning my period of the glam world, Raymond tells me his. Raymond, it's over to you.
Very, very similar, actually, because I had like a kind of classical music training. And my parents weren't really into music, so we never really had they never really had the radio on, so I missed out on all the kind of 60 stuff. I was born in 61, so we didn't get a record player until I think it was like 73. So the first records I got were all, my first love would be glam as well, actually. So like T-Rex, Bowie, Roxy Music, and then the Sweet Gary Glitter, and all sort of Chin Chapman stuff. I still really love that stuff, because I remember we were at school, and at lunchtime you'd have like a little transistor, and we would listen to the chart rundown on Johnny Walker, and we'd even write it down and stuff. Me and my brother at home as well. So it was a really kind of great time, because it was miserable black and white world growing up, and then we had the Troubles kicking off as well. So I think it kind of saved me, actually, having these fantastical glam creatures, that seem to come from another planet.
Yeah, so I think
to kind of take you out of your environment, and I was always a bit of a dreamer, a bit of a kind of, I was always living in my head, basically, just to kind of escape, I suppose, the mundanity of the whole situation where I was living, So it was a great escape. It probably saved me, really, to be honest.
Yeah, so I think that kind of the chart countdown on a Sunday evening was such a highlight, and then Top of the Pops on the Thursday was also another highlight, and seeing people like Alice Cooper doing Schools Out just felt such a sort of moment, and even the Osmonds doing Absolutely. Crazy Horses seemed incredible.
Yeah, there was always, well, if you look back now, there's probably what you thought was the golden time. If you look at the charts from the early 70s up until about 75, I would say, it was pretty brilliant, because you had all the glam stuff. You had like all really great soul, like black music from America, and then you had like the beginnings of reggae and ska and stuff as well. So it was a really great, and things could get in. You know yourself, like something that was a bit off the wall or whatever could get into the charts. Just by pure coincidence, really.
Yes, coupled with a few strange novelty songs by Telly Savalas and Benny Hill.
Could do without all those. Could do without all those. But I remember, you get I remember one of the first LPs I got was like, one of those K-Tel kind of greatest hits or whatever. And the hit rate on it is pretty good. It's still pretty good. I remember one I had in particular, I would say 3/4 of it was great.
Yes, well, I can, I remember my parents are getting, well, it's interesting you mentioned not having a record player, because my parents, we came from the countryside in East Anglia, and they're very working class, and they were the generation that never borrowed money. So if they wanted something, they would, have to work, and then buy it. And I think when they got married in the late 50s, they kind of sold everything, and they just kind of, including the record player that my dad had, and that got introduced in the sort of the early mid 70s with a few records that they bought, which were quite shockingly bad. Like they were really into bad country and western, actually.
Everything in our house was like, my mum started doing if you remember Kay's catalog.
Yes.
So, like we started getting everything from Kay's catalog. My first guitar and amplifier was from Kay's catalog. It wasn't a great guitar, obviously, but it was £100, and I was able to pay it off £1 a week And I had a paper round to pay it off. So that's how I did it, So I did £1 a week for 100 weeks to pay it off. And then because I was, as I said to you, I was kind of classically trained pianist, but I was kind of like, a bit like a robot, really. They put the music down and you'd play it or whatever. But as far as I remember, I don't remember really sitting down afterwards and trying to work out anything. And then the teacher was an epileptic, and he one day fell over the top of me and he pinned me down to the piano. I was only like 8 or 9 or something. And he pinned me down. I thought he was dead. And so I was there like shaking for about 20 minutes, and then I managed to extricate myself, and so I ran down into the park, and I told my mum that he moved away, obviously, because I was just too young to deal with the whole sort of trauma of it. And then my mum met the teacher a few weeks later, and he kind of explained what happened, and they dealt with it really badly. Instead of going back to see him when he was back normal again and trying to sort of settle the whole situation, I gave up piano, basically. I did go to another teacher for a while, but I'd lost interest. So whenever I wanted to play guitar, my parents were like, "No, will you give up piano?" I was like, "Really? I don't think so. That's not how it was." So I had to I basically bought a guitar and I basically taught myself.
Yes, my God.
I was just about to give up. I wasn't about to give up, but I was kind of playing away by myself. But that was the kind of era of like sort of Jimi Hendrix and the guitar heroes and Rory Gallagher, people like that. And I knew I was never going to be that good, you know what I mean? No matter how much I practiced or whatever. But then punk came along, and that was just fantastic because, really it was, 3 chords and anybody can do it. But, you have to have something to say, and I had loads to say, obviously. So that was good for me.
The one thing that our community was particularly big on was football and sport. Did that sort of circle into your life at all?
Yeah, I mean, before music, I was obsessed with football, really. And I mean, I played, like both myself and Damien O'Neill, we both played in the kind of the best football team in Derry. Right. And I would have taken that quite seriously up until I was about 15, and then started smoking, and chasing after girls and stuff. And I just, I kind of lost interest a bit, especially as music had sort of become more prominent in my life. So, I still love playing football, and I really regret whenever I came over here, I was 22, 23, and kind of stopped doing sports when I came over here. And I really regret it, because when I was in Derry, people would phone you up all the time. They're one short for a 5-a-side. So I'd be just playing all the time. So even though you were out and carousing and boozing and doing whatever, you'd wake up the next day and you'd go and play football and you'd sweat it all out and you feel fantastic again. And I missed that whenever I came over here, because I just didn't know enough people who were sporty like that over here.
No, it was not a good time. But I was, it was George Best. I was obsessed with George Best, and
everybody was. I had a pair of George Best. Did you have George Best boots?
Yes, I have got a pair of. Well, I had a pair of George Best boots that I've got.
Stylo, was it?
Stylo with the little kind of line, and there's a little picture.
They were great. I loved them because they were, normally, the boots around that time were pretty horrible, especially when you compare them to what the players wear now. But the George Best ones were quite sleek and stylish, and I actually played well in them as well. So it was, that was a great thing.
You were channeling
Best. I mean, he was. Everybody loved George Best, if you were our age, he was the business.
And I still put on the Belfast Boy and listen to that with great excitement, because it still has that kind of drive to it. I don't know if you know the song, but the Belfast Boy, you're just a kid from Ireland.
Yeah.
God, it's such a great song. Have a listen to it later. It will just blow your mind. You'll want to do little keep it ups.
Yeah, I had, because I was I supported Manchester United first and George Best, obviously, and I had all this memorabilia, and then I don't know what happened. I swapped it with this guy, and he kind of ripped me off, And then I had this uncle, and he went to Leeds one time, to Leeds United, and then he came back, and he really was on my case to change my team to Leeds United, and I ended up doing it for a while. And it was just sheer kind of peer pressure, and because he was the youngest in my mum's family, so he was about, I think he was about 16, 17 years younger than my mum. So he was kind of closer to my age, really. But he really bullied me into doing it. So I unfortunately supported Leeds for a few years, and then I kind of gave up on them because, number one, everybody hated them with good reason, probably as well. And then I
Yes.
went back to Manchester United again, and I've supported Manchester United now after that since about the late 70s, early 80s, mid 80s again.
Yeah, it was painful because when I started supporting them, that was when they were dreadful and they got relegated. But
Yeah,
then
of
that was
course.
my first love. And to be honest, everyone in our family liked Ipswich, which would have been so much better. But I had to go through the relegation of Man United. So
Yeah, but they were good. Ipswich around that time, weren't they? There was
they were
Bobby
they
Robson
were
there.
always second or third to Leeds or
Yeah,
Liverpool, you know. So
good team. But I remember what was it? Is it Beattie? What was the guy Beattie?
Kevin Beattie was their kind
Kevin,
of left back. He
did you
was
remember that story about him? Somebody told me recently, like, before he became a footballer, he didn't even have a pair of shoes at one time. Somebody had lent him a pair of shoes. That's how poor he was. And then he obviously became, quite well-known footballer and stuff. What an amazing story. I mean, that's what, 1973, 74, 75.
Well, I remember, God, this is slightly off the track, but let's just. I remember Derek Dugan talking. He was Wolves. He said,
Yeah,
"Well,
Wolves,
if you haven't got a football, you can just get some rags together and then play with that instead." And you think, I'm sure I haven't made that story up. I'm sure.
No, that's true. That's true. Yeah. Well, you know the story about Best. They used to play with like a tennis ball, and it was a free for all. So you'd have maybe 35 people playing, and he held it. He had the ball, and nobody could get it. 35 people couldn't get it off him. That's how good he was.
Yeah. So
and those Brazilians as well. They grew up playing on their bare feet. So that's why it's so good.
That's what gave him ball control. But it was kind of strange because it was that kind of that sort of world. Gee. So what was your I love talking about football from the 70s.
No, me too. Well, we did actually. I mean, we kind of preempted, because like by about 1990, whenever, but just before the Britpop era, then the football thing sort of became really trendy. But we were talking about football, in the early days of the Petrols as well. And I mean, because the magazine, the fanzine, when Saturday comes,
yes, my brother still gets that.
An Undertones song. Yes, I remember. Just as we were starting the Petrols, the guy from that did When Saturday Comes was getting in touch with John O'Neill, to say, is it okay, we're using this title? And of course he was really happy because he's a football fan as well.
Yes. So that was quite, it was good. And my first World Cup was 74, and that's why I loved Johan Cruyff and the colour orange ever since. So.
Yeah, that was a great team, but mine was the first time I ever, my first fantastic final was 70, and I actually was at this kind of rich relative's house, and they had a color TV. So it was the first time I ever saw a color TV as well. So to see that match in Technicolor when it was such a brilliant game as well was, it's really that's something I'll never forget.
Yes, I think our color telly happened in 72 with the Olympics, and that was exciting. Just like we were amazed.
Yeah, no, of course, yeah. Because remember watching snooker in the early, again, black and white in the early days.
Yes, I know, it was all very
weird now.
I do remember Dad's Army. We were all amazed that when the start of it begins, there's this kind of puff of smoke and there's this red smoke, and we were like, "My God, I didn't realize that was red," because obviously it was black and white. It was just a version of grey, wasn't it? So
I know. My God.
It was kind of, and then that thing, you push the telly on, wouldn't you? And then it would have to warm up for a bit, and it's coming on. It was delayed, wasn't it? It was very delayed, the telly in those days. So what was your first gig? What was the first gig that you kind of went to at that stage?
Well, hardly any. Obviously in the in the 70s, a lot of bands wouldn't come to Ireland, because they were to the north because they were scared. But so we had the first band that I saw went over to, because Derry's on the border with the south, even though it's in the northwest. So my uncle, the same uncle who made me support Leeds for a while, he took me to see this band called Horselips, who were like they were kind of like they played traditional Irish songs, but they were electric.
Yes,
and they were great. And I mean, if you talk to anybody Irish, my age, my generation, I think nearly all of us, the first live band we all saw would have been Horselips.
Yeah, can I?
And they were great.
So I just did an interview last week with somebody, and they mentioned this band, and I was like, I've never heard of them before, actually. And it's like, who the hell are Horselips?
So they basically updated a lot of really old sort of traditional airs and stuff, and they're great. I mean, they were really great musicians. They were young, they looked great as well. So they looked like like a normal. They looked like a band of the time, but and they had electric guitars and drums and bass, blah blah blah. But they
Yes.
had this kind of. So they actually did very very well in America. I don't like. I mean, a lot of people of our generation would know them.
Yeah, because it was Rodney from the Cassandra Complex who went to Leeds and became that electro band,
Yeah,
which
I
is
know
still going.
Rodney.
And he said Horselips were the band that he first saw as well. So
Yeah, because they would have played around. I mean, apart from that, we would have had show bands. We had like Ireland would have had this show band circuit, and we would go to these dances on a Thursday night or whatever, and these show bands, they were really really ultra professional. They could play like whatever was on the charts, and they would do a really good job usually. So that was what we got.
yes. And what was that? Oh, God, it was a horrendous story. But what was the band that kind of got murdered on the border? Who was a show band who were completely
Oh my God, the Miami show band, terrible. My God, you don't want to read the details of it. I mean, it's just horrendous. And the thing about them, the thing that's even worse about that is because they were like a mix of religions. They were, they were Protestant Catholics, and like a lot of musicians, through the ages, they didn't care about religion. Do you know what I mean? But it was just that time was so horrendous. And I mean, the singer got shot 56 times in the face. You just think there's some, and he was a very good looking kid as well. So you just think whoever did that, they had some serious issues. Let's just say
Jesus.
awful. So yeah, so I mean, in the Miami, they were, they could command really good money. They played to thousands of people, because that's all we had basically. A lot of time, we would go. I mean, I never was that fussed on. I wasn't standing watching the show bands thinking, oh, he's playing a whatever guitar, Fender
A G
Strat or
sharp.
whatever. We were just chasing girls by that stage. That's all I was interested in. Because I was
Yes.
like, I've got my music at home and I know what I like. So, you just listen to whatever. But usually a lot of show bands, they'd play these hits from like the late 50s, like Running Bear, if you know that song.
No, I don't.
You don't know Running Bear, Love Little White Dove? It's like a kind of, yeah, I'm sure it's like late 50s. So it was all that kind of stuff. It was kind of like a tail end of rockabilly, sort of Elvis impersonators, that sort of thing, really.
Yes, because in the 80s we all started getting into people like Christy Moore, didn't we? And John Peel used to play a lot of Irish folk, like
Yeah, well, I mean, Christie's solo stuff, especially. I saw Christie play in Glastonbury in 1986 when we played, and I hadn't seen anything like it because there was about, it was early in the day, so it wasn't the full crowd, but there was still about, I don't know, maybe 78,000 people there. And
yes,
he held that audience in the palm of his hand. I'd never seen anything like that before. It's
yes.
extraordinary.
I remember
Yes,
seeing at the UEA, and he came on just with is it Baron or
boron, a
Boron,
boron, yeah. The
and he,
very
and he
tough. If you ever try to play a boron, it looks easy. It's very difficult. It's a
yeah, I can
real
imagine.
skill, yeah, and he's great at it as well. So yeah, so
Yes,
Christie's fantastic.
yes. So as the 70s progressed, did you? I mean, sort of. I suppose if you were born 61, so by 77, 78, you must have been coming to sort of school leaving age at this stage.
Yeah, I did my O levels and did really well, and then I did my A levels, and during the A levels, at that 2 year period, that's when punk happened, and I got really really into music, and I kind of lost interest in my studies. I still managed to do enough to get to university, so I went to university up in the north of Ireland. This was called the New University of Ulster. It's kind of more or less gone now.
Yes,
So I went there, and it was only 35 miles up the road, but it was completely different from Derry because there was no soldiers there and there was no police or anything. I mean, it was like paradise, and it's by the sea as well. So I kind of, during my time in Derry, it was very restrictive. You couldn't really go anywhere. If you stayed out late, your mum would be worried all the time. So I kind of had all this pent up frustration and energy. And then when I went to university, I went a bit mad for a while, and kind of sowed my wild oats. But it was great. And then I met like-minded people there as well who were all into music. All my friends would have been all, people who were into the same kind of music. So that was a
yes.
great time. And then
So
I came back to Derry after that, and that's when I connected with John O'Neill, and we started the Petrols. But I'd been
Yeah.
at school, like I was friends with Damien. Me and Damien were at primary school together, so I know Damien since I was 4. And whenever he was in the Undertones, would see him I'd see him in the pub, and I'd always be asking him questions, about like meeting the Clash and playing this, going on tour in America, recording. So I was always keen to find out what was going on and stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And just on that university front, because that was the period that you would get a grant, so you didn't even have to end up with a debt. And also, yeah, you're right. It does give a lot of people that chance to, I suppose, just kind of sort of create almost a new identity, really, isn't it? Because no one knows your history, and also like you said. So, did you get people and students from all over the country or all over?
Yeah, well, there would have been people from all over the UK. There was, and from some from the south of Ireland as well. So it was a good mix, but it was quite a small university, so it was actually quite nice.
Yeah.
It wasn't too big, so you kind of knew everybody, And then some bands would come. I mean, we were lucky to see Dexys Midnight Runners came just after Dance Dance came out, and we all had Dance Dance, so we knew them. So we were telling everybody, go to this gig, go to this gig. It was 50p to get in, I think. Proper student prices at that time. But there only 50 people turned up. But they played like there was 50,000 there. I mean, they gave one of the greatest shows I've ever seen, one of the best gigs I've ever seen. Still, they were just, they were ready. They were ready to go. And then like Gino was number 1 about 8-9 weeks later.
Right. So that was just before.
And I got to meet Kevin and stuff. I subsequently met him years later because he liked the Petrols as well. He used to come and see us. And Kevin's the only person I've ever asked for an autograph ever. And it was inspirational. I mean, it was really the key for me to think I've got to try and get into a band. I've got to try and do music because this is it. That what I saw them doing. And I mean, I know they weren't really they weren't obviously a kind of heavy guitar band, but just the feeling I got from that gig, I thought, this is it. I want to do that.
Yeah, so it's quite nice. I did an interview with Helen O'Hara last week because she's got a new book out, and she joins the band for the second album, and then the third one. It was amazing, and then she goes on to work with Tanita Tikaram and various other people, which is quite amazing. So, yeah,
she's great. Yeah, when she was Kevin's partner for a while as well, wasn't she?
Yes, they were a couple, but
for a while, weren't they?
She was, she'd gone to university doing kind of classical music and then had that choice, either do Dexys or become part of a kind of orchestra. And she took Dexys, which was, the
right path. Yeah.
I know, the classic years, really, wasn't it? Yeah, that Searching for the Young Soul Rebels, which was the first album, is just amazing. It's still amazing. So,
great records, great records.
So during the 80s, which was an interesting period, because, 79, Thatcher gets in, then we had the Falkland War, then we had Greenham Common, the miners' strike. Then towards the mid-80s, it was Red Wedge and everything was getting very political. So this is where, that Petrol Emotion starts to emerge, isn't it, during the kind of glorious 80s. And also, for me, between 83 to 87 is the years of the Smiths. That was a huge chapter in my life, obviously. So what was it like for you during that kind of moment where you started to, or the band started to be, become a unit?
John, sorry, go ahead.
No, well, what was it like when, the band started to become a unit and you started to bring it together? Because obviously there was the Undertones, but that had stopped. And
when I met John, the Undertones had broken up and he was kind of down in the dumps, So how it started was we became friends. We just playing records, him and me and a friend of ours, Mickey Rennie. And then we got the chance to do a club night, like old school disco, basically, at the kind of prime venue in Derry, which was called The Venue. And it had a really nice setup, nice decks and everything. So we used to get it. We would get together a couple of nights a week, and we would sort of get like a playlist together. We would sort of listen and say, well, what records go together, a bit like what they do now, but they would just kind of blend them together. Whereas then we just wrote everything down and we put them on. So we started this club night and it became quite popular amongst alternative people in Derry, which there wasn't that many, to be honest. You're talking about maybe 100 at most But it became like almost like a religion for those people because there was nobody else was playing these records. So, they flocked to our club. And John kind of got his enthusiasm back. And at that time, I was playing in another local band called Bam Bam and the Calling.
Right.
So once I'd finished university, I kind of almost, because I couldn't, at university, as much fun as I had, I could never find anybody the right people to sort of start a band with. So I kind of almost given up in a way. And then all of a sudden, I'm in Bam Bam and the Calling playing locally all the time. And then John asks me to, if I wanted to start working with him as well on his new project, because he got his enthusiasm back. So it was an amazing time for me. I mean, from growing up in Derry and feeling like I just wanted to get out of it the whole time I was kind of growing up, my adolescence, teenage years. And then coming back after university and having like a year and a half there, probably one of the happiest times of my life, really kind of carefree and loads of great things happening, loads of great people I met as well. And then he said, we need to go, if we're going to make a go of this band, we need to move to London. So we moved to London in October 84. And that was quite tough. The first year in London was very tough because we didn't really know anybody and we had no money.
Yes.
So that was tough until we sort of started playing. So it seemed to take a long time for the band to get, to get the other members and for us to get going. But when I look back now, it's basically, it only took about 8 months or something to get everybody together. I mean, when we got Steve Mack, we had a few false starts. I mean, I was a singer for a while, and it was hard for me to play and sing certain songs. So I knew that we had to get somebody, and we needed a focal point as well. My kind of delivery was a bit too kind of melancholic or whatever. That's what
right.
people say. And I wasn't confident either. Do you know what I mean? I mean, I think if I had been given the chance, I would have got better. But I mean, it turned out we got Steve, and he was a better frontman, so that worked out okay.
So on that the famous single that you brought out, which is now on the C85 compilation with Cherry Red Records, this is Keen, isn't it? This was on the Pink label at that time.
Yeah, what happened was like Mickey Rooney, our friend Mickey Rooney, he was at college in Coventry, and he was friends with this woman called Elaine Green, who subsequently married Dick Green from Creation. So Elaine came over to Derry just before we moved to London. So she knew that we were starting a band. So she told Dick, who told Alan McGee. So Alan McGee wrote John O'Neill a letter and said, I'll put a single out if you come over. So we were going over to be on the Creation label. But what happened then was the Jesus Mary Chain they put the Jesus Mary Chain single out, and that was doing quite well, and they kind of had no money. So they kept saying to us, wait,
Yeah.
And it got to the stage where we couldn't wait anymore. We were just kind of kicking our heels, and we wanted to get started. So the Pink label were basically Creation's sort of rivals. They were friendly rivals. So it wasn't anything too cutthroat. But so they got a lot of the bands that Creation should have got but missed out on, like the Gin Brides, for example, should have been on Creation as well. Same thing happened to them, so that's how they ended up on Pink as well, because Creation had no money at the time. So we went to Pink, and that's how we ended up on Pink.
Right. Yes, and I think the Wolfhounds were on Pink label as well.
Yeah, the Wolfhounds were on Pink as well.
Yeah,
and we really liked the Wolfhounds. We really liked them a lot.
So did you play
them live? Actually, was fantastic because they were dead young. They were younger than us. They were younger than us. They were younger than the Gin Brides.
Yes.
They just had this amazing energy about them. I remember the first time I saw them, they just completely blew me away. And I think their records never really captured that early energy, really.
I do remember John Peel playing Another Hazy Day on Another Lazy A.
Yeah.
I might have got that wrong, but I do.
That's right. That's because that first single on Pink, I think it's an EP. It's a 4-track EP. Yeah.
Yes, it was. I just
one
remember
called Dead Thing. It was a kind of fast song called Dead Thing, and they look great as well because one of the guitar players was left-handed and the other one's right-handed. So it just looks great on stage. The two of them, and they would always have their heads down. They were like playing away and stuff. It looked fantastic, and then we became quite friendly with Dave Callahan.
Yes.
Thereafter, he kind of hung around with our sort of extended bunch of friends. There was a whole load of us around that time. Used to go out together.
Did you play
French people, Canadians, Australians, New Zealanders, and loads of Irish, obviously. It was a real motley crew because a lot of people from our group in Derry followed us over here and went to work on the sites and stuff. So for a few years, there was a real mob of us. We'd all go and drink up in Camden
Yes.
and Loch.
And I know talking to a few Australian and New Zealand bands, they'd often sort of think, right, a bit like you, right, we need to go to London, squat in London. So there was kind of, I think, kind of scenes that started to develop around.
Yeah, well, it was easy to get squats because like our flat wasn't actually a squat, but along the same corridor, Damien and Steve, they got another flat and they squatted in there. And then some other friends, for at one stage there was about 5 flats that were squatted in our block, and it was good because these people were, some of these people were like painters and decorators and stuff, so they do up the flat. It wasn't like they moved in and it was just a horrible mess. They really took care of these properties.
Yeah, it's an amazing time. Did you play at any of the Alan McGee nights, like the living room and any of those?
That was just before we came, but they did, like Dick did set up the first gig because we had this woman called Mel for a while, this young woman, as a singer for one gig. So she played a gig we did in Islington. I'm going to forget the name of the pub now, but I think maybe that was the sort of tail end of Creation putting on gigs. But I think they kind of were winding that down, so we missed out on the living room. So we weren't there. That was before before we came, really. But something similar. So we played this gig with this woman Mel, and then she was too much of a kind of rock chick and didn't really work out. So that she went, and then we got Steve a couple of months after that. Then
yes. And how did you discover the American lead singer?
Three mutual friends. No, yeah, 3 mutual friends. He was working in this pizza restaurant called Grunt's in Covent Garden. And actually, his boss was Jack D, the comedian.
Oh, blimey, yes.
He was the manager, he wasn't the boss of the whole place, but he was the general manager. And there was this English woman who was going out with one of our friends. She was living with one of our friends, Labrador Grove, where John O'Neill and Caroline were staying. So Steve heard about that we were looking for a singer through them, and he auditioned, and we weren't sure about him at first, so he had to do, I think he did like a couple of different, I think he did like 2, we rehearsed him twice before we sort of said yes. And like John O'Neill was really keen on him. He thought, yeah, he's going to work, but the rest of us weren't really sure. And I would say it took him about 6 months to become really good. I think he wasn't great to start off with, but he kind of willed himself to be great. And then he became this kind of super energetic frontman who's, it was really funny because I remember John in the early days, John O'Neill telling them to stop moving around so much, which seems hilarious now in retrospect. Yes. But his whole thing was about jumping around and stage diving and everything, Even when we reformed in 2008, he just had the most amazing energy. Because I remember we played this gig, it was like a festival. It was the Hop Farm, I think, down in Kent somewhere. The Hop Farm Festival, we were on at like 12 o'clock midday. And, you can imagine it's hard to get the crowd going, at that time of day and stuff as well. But he managed it. He just gave all his energy. And I remember thinking, this guy's incredible, In his 40s now, and he's still doing it. Yeah.
Yes, we suddenly appreciate good knees and ankles, don't we, and hips. So at a certain age. So then,
especially, yeah.
And then as that year progressed, because then you signed to Demon Records at this stage, don't you?
In 86, yes. So we were supposed to be, we were looking to make an LP. So we'd done Keen and V2. There was obviously enough material. We'd been playing around. We thought we were ready to do an LP now. So Rough Trade, actually, we're going to put it out. And then for some reason they changed their mind. So Demon came in. It was a guy called Andrew Lauder.
Right.
Got a really great track record. He used to work for United Artists, and he signed Can and the Buzzcocks, people like that. So he signed us to Demon for one record, and that did really well. So of course, it sold, I think it sold about 40,000. And obviously once the majors saw that it was selling and, we looked good and the photographs and stuff, so there was a whole... all of a sudden we were inundated with offers, from the majors.
Yes.
Polydor 87.
I know it's a golden age, isn't it? I guess with Rough Trade, they were probably a bit obsessed with the Smiths at that stage, trying to sort out.
I think maybe. Well, I don't know what happened. I always wonder what would have happened. Actually, like even with Creation. I mean, I always feel like we should have been a Creation band, really, because Alan would have known what to do with us. He would have known better what to do.
Did you have kind of those issues where people signed you and then would leave the company, and then the rest of the management wondered, like, who the hell signed this lot? You know, it was
No, because I'll tell you what happened. Like the MD of Polydor, he signed us to the Polydor for Babel.
right.
And then, unfortunately, after Babel had kind of run its course, he left to manage Paul McCartney. So that's when the trouble started at Polydor, because the guy that came in, he had a beef with our manager. They had a lot of past history, so it was never going to work, you know. And we basically, he called this new guy. He was called, I can't remember his name now, but he called us into our office, and we just come off this kind of quite fractious European tour. You know, after Babel came out, it was obviously one of the high points of our career, and we were really busy, and you're in demand, so you're just away and playing all the time and doing stuff. And by the end of that year, we were just completely knackered, and just a bit of sort of fractious behavior going on, and people threatening to leave as usual. And this new guy, Polydor, called us into his office and basically sort of read the riot act, saying, "Oh, I won't hit singles, and I'm not getting them from you. You need to pull your socks up, blah blah." So our manager went away and he found a lawyer, and they found a clause to get us out.
Right.
And that's how we ended up going to Virgin. But in retrospect, it really killed our career in America, because Babel was Rolling Stones Record of the Year 1987. So we went to America to sort of promote Babel. But by the time we got there, we weren't on Polydor anymore. We were on Virgin. So Polydor weren't working the record anymore, and Virgin had nothing to work with. So we were caught in the middle.
Jesus, that's always the classic moment, isn't it?
And then with Virgin were great. I can't say a bad word about Virgin. We had our head of our A&R, Wooly Richardson. He's a fellow Irishman from the north, and he was just fantastic. I mean, he would say, like when we did demos and stuff, he'd say, "Oh no, there's no single in there. Go away and write more." But he never. That was about it. He always let us kind of do what we wanted. Apart from that, so I have nothing but good things to say about Virgin. Actually, they were great to us, but they just couldn't get us into the top 40. And I think the politics held us back. I think definitely as well.
Yeah,
especially around '88. There was that. I don't know if you remember, 1988 was a pretty horrible year. It was a horrible year for me personally, but it was a horrible year. It was like you had those actors coming on the news, and they would say Jerry Adams's words. Do you remember that?
Oh God. Yeah.
So Genius Move, our first single for Virgin, Genius Move, which should have been the one to kind of push us through to the top 40.
Yes.
It was banned by the BBC, but it was tacitly banned because after Frankie Goes to Hollywood, they knew they couldn't make a fuss about banning the record anymore. That would just give it notoriety and would sell more. So they just tacitly banned a few things, because we, unfortunately, on the back sleeve of Genius Move, there was a quote from this Irish guy called Liam Fellows, and it was like we'd seen it, and it was taken from Jerry Adams's book, but we didn't But somebody, I think it was our tour manager, he was left to take this information, put it on the sleeve, and for some reason he decided to put Jerry Adams's name on it as well. The quote was nothing to do with Jerry Adams,
right?
But because Jerry Adams's name was on it, it was just tainted immediately. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then the record, Genius Move, just kind of died. It didn't really do anything, and it's a shame. We made a great video for it, which was shown on the chart show once or something, and that was it. So we lost a lot of momentum, and it was, I think, in people's minds as well. We put out the End of the Millennium, and at the time, people just didn't understand that record. It was meant to be like a kind of mixtape that we loved in the van. It was about everything, but people weren't ready for it. So people were, I think they were confused, or God knows what happened. So we kind of lost a lot of momentum around that time. And then John O'Neill decided that he wanted to go back to Derry as well, and that was a big. Uh, that caused a lot of kind of friction because he decided to tell us that he was leaving the first night that we went to the studio to record End of Millennium. So the whole recording of that was just kind of horrible.
Yes, God,
Yeah.
As a fan, you always think everyone's having this great time. And, I think I saw you at Glastonbury. My first one was about 87. Then
yeah, 87. We played 86. We played Glastonbury on the main stage, 86 and 87. They were really good. Both of them were really good shows. That was
and then John Peel playing Big Decision was a huge moment, wasn't it? Because you had that kind of quote from Brother D and the Collective Effort?
Yeah, Brother D and the Collective Effort.
Because at that stage, Peel started playing all those stuff on Sleeping Bag Records and Def Jam, and there was all those people like Roxy Shanti and early Public Enemy.
It was a very exciting time. I was more excited about kind of hip hop and stuff around that time than it was about sort of guitar music that was happening.
Yeah,
I hope this is not against the kind of ethos of your whole show, but I was never really mad about that C86 tape.
Yeah, that was C86.
The one that I loved was the C81. That's the one that I loved.
It has a track by Lynx on, which I always find quite amazing.
Yeah. That was what I liked about it. It had, it kind of went from poppy stuff to like the avant-garde, so it was really good.
It was, it had that kind of slight post-punk vibe still, whereas C86...
Totally, it was a very creative time, and people were doing, it wasn't kind of Ramalama punk anymore. It was all, people were really listening to lots of different things and getting inspired by different things. It was great.
Yeah, well, there's an interesting film that's just come out about a band called Rima Rima, who only lasted 12 months, and it had people like Marco Perroni, Dorothy, Max Parker, and another group, but they just put out one sort of EP and then split, and then their work has been kind of reissued, just issued and collected and archived. And this guy's made a film which came out last year about
really? I don't know about that, because I remember Marco was in them. I always liked Marco
Perroni.
I really loved that. I really loved that Adam and the Ants first LP. I loved that.
Yes, and it is an interesting time, that late 70s, early 80s, because people...
totally.
It is fascinating. Yeah, so the C86 is 22 rather... I'm hoping that Cherry Red Records go back, because they're kind of gone... They went forward with their kind of collection of 86 to 87 to 91, but hopefully they'll go to 85 and then back again a bit further, because I think it really will kind of archive a decade quite nicely, as good as you can.
You got people like, I was thinking, you get people like a Monochrome set, for example, who've kind of been very much overlooked, and they were great. I mean, I remember like their debut record's fantastic as well.
Yes, absolutely.
They're not a lot, actually. It's really funny. There's a few bands that I've really been kind of rediscovering. I think because, politically, it's felt to me like 1979 all over again, about the last 6 or 7 years. So I've been listening to a lot of music from that period as well. It seems to fit perfectly,
Yes, absolutely. So when, with the end of the millennium, it's a very eclectic mix of songs on there, aren't there? There are. I mean, when you listen to it now,
sequenced. I think it's badly sequenced.
Right.
It's because everything's, all the best stuff is all on side one as well. So it's and there's a couple of songs like the only thing I could criticize Virgin for, they made us put like 2 tracks on them. None of us were particularly that fond of. They were basically B-sides, and they asked us to put these 2 tracks on, and it made it a bit unwieldy, I think, as well. But I think that nobody really got a handle on it, and I think we maybe didn't explain properly. But if you can imagine, there was a lot of upheaval going on in the band at that time. I mean, I basically had a breakdown in the second part of 1988, so I was in a really, really bad place.
Yeah,
and that was to do with just partying too much, and I'd broken up with my girlfriend. I was just kind of the loose end, and I really kind of lost the plot. I actually had to be replaced on the tour as well. So even that, that Norwich gig that you said, I think I didn't. I'm not sure. What do you know the date of it?
Yes, I do. It's September the 30th, 1988.
So I wonder. I'm not even sure. That might have been even when I was replaced. I was replaced for like the last 4 or 5 shows. Although my memory now, I think that might have been one of the first ones, so maybe I did play it, but I wasn't really in a good place at all.
No, my
And I had
God.
to go away and kind of recover and sort of get myself back
It's
back
it's
on track again.
rock and roll should come with a health warning, really, shouldn't it? Because it's
Well,
not good.
yeah, well, somebody's telling me about somebody's written a book, and the book's basically about the mental health of musicians, how badly they've been treated over the years and stuff.
Yeah, I think I've got it. I think it's called Bodies, but it might not be. But
Yes,
yeah,
Bodies, that's the one, Bodies, yeah.
yeah, I know. It's
Somebody
not.
was suggesting that I read that because it's, and I think like every band, I mean, the thing about it is if you're not a very kind of someone who's really got their feet on the ground, I mean, any kind of success at all, even if it's not that big, it can really throw you, and it's really odd. When you're growing up, you think, oh, it'd be great to be famous. But if you actually have a little bit of fame, it's quite horrible, actually, because the thing that I didn't like about it is because people know who you are, they think they know who you are just because of, your public image or the way that you come across through your songs or whatever. And of course they
Yes.
don't, and they're overly familiar, and they kind of, you almost become their property. Like if you're not really nice to everybody and like like have a fantastic public persona all the time, they'll become really arsy with you, and like I saw Damien have a really kind of horrible experience during the Petrols time. There was these guys used to come and see the Petrols all the time, and they used to go and see the Undertones as well. And he didn't really have much contact with them, but they would turn up and he would get them on the guest list. So one time, and so he'd been doing this for years. Say he was doing it for about 4 or 5 years, and then one time he forgot to put this guy and one of his friends on the guest list, and the guy started giving him like dogs abuse, like really insulting him and stuff. And I was there, I saw this, and I just couldn't believe it. The cheek of this person, he was getting kind of VIP treatment, and like Damien didn't even know him that well. Do you know what I mean? He just knew him like casually or whatever. So that was very, very bizarre to see that firsthand.
Yeah,
I mean,
no.
most of our fans, like, don't get me wrong, most of our fans are lovely, and through Facebook and the internet now, I've really interacted with a lot of them, and they're nearly all lovely people, and I'm very appreciative. They buy everything that we put out, and they're still fans, and they still ask about stuff. So I'm really
Yes.
appreciative. But I think it's a double-edged sword, being in a band, and I think, if you look at most bands, there's always a couple of people that are susceptible to drinking drugs or whatever. And if you get really, really big, I can imagine if there's nobody looking after you properly, you can really lose your way very quickly.
Yeah, I know. It's kind of something that I've often thought about. How some people can survive and some people don't. And it is yeah,
I think it's to do with your characters. And it's like you look like someone like Bruce Springsteen, who's obviously was always quite a very sort of grounded person. So he's been okay for the most part. Although reading his book, he suffered from depression quite a lot as well. And I
yeah.
think, whenever you play live and you get that amazing buzz, the thing about it is it's quite hard to come down for it. So I think that's why a lot of us drink or take drugs or whatever, because if you're on that kind of a high, which is really fantastic, it's like, well, how do you kind of decompress and come down every night again and then get back up to do it the next night? It takes a lot out of you, even like just psychically.
Yeah, no, God, I could imagine. And also, as often people say when they do those tours, they come home often to an empty flat with an empty fridge.
Yeah, it's difficult. Yeah, it's difficult to. I remember coming back. We were in America. We did a month in America. It was probably my favorite tour ever. So that would have been after John and Neil left, and we almost broke up, and then we reconvened and we became friends again, and then we started writing really. We came up with some really great material again. So we went to America, and we hadn't really been playing a lot there. So we had 3 records out, so people knew a lot about us, and they were ready for us, and it gave us a new burst of energy. It was fantastic. But I came back off that tour, and to come back to an empty flat in central London, and it's a wet Monday morning, and you're like, well, what do I do now? Do you know what I mean? It's like it's a real come down.
Yes, it's yeah, I could imagine. There's just nothing there, is there? It's
But I think,
emptiness.
well, as when I said to you when I had my breakdown, I mean, I was put in this hospital unit And to this day, I'm not even sure where it was. I know it's over West London somewhere. I'm not even sure what the hospital's called. But I was put in this hospital, and basically, I hadn't been sleeping, and I was overdoing everything. So they gave me sedatives, and basically slept for about 2 days, and immediately felt a lot better. I mean, it took longer to kind of get back to myself again. But I didn't get any therapy. Nobody really spoke to me, even though I was in this expensive hospital. I was able to sign myself out after 4 days, and I wasn't really ready, But no, I had no kind of therapy or anything after that. Nowadays, nobody would have let that happen. Do you know what I mean? You would have had therapy. You would have been talking about it. People would have been more understanding about your situation because you couldn't. You felt like I felt like I was at my lowest ebb, but I felt like I had failed everybody. You know what I mean? I was still beating myself up. It wasn't like, nobody really understood then. Do you know what I mean? There wasn't the understanding that there is now, thank goodness, for people through that.
It is quite, that experience of,
But don't get me wrong. There's so many other great experiences and really happy times. I mean, the band was going for 10 years.
I know.
So, even though we're not really considered a success, I mean, I think to go for 10 years and we actually made seven records, including 2 live ones.
Yeah.
So and I mean, we've just put out our box set.
It is extraordinary. Yeah, because actually what's quite interesting, having done so many of these interviews, most bands only have 5 years. They have the 12 months honeymoon, the single, John Peel session, first album, van around the UK, doing all the little gigs, then the second album, possibly a third, but then, they just had it. So 5 years seems to be so 10 years is quite unbelievable. And for some of the people who have also been in the Undertones, it's quite, you kind of have done sort of some form of national service, really, haven't you? But but one thing I did notice with doing this is that a lot of bands did get kind of like about 87, 88, trying to remember my decades. I mean, when I go back to the Smiths, when they broke up, there was this kind of like, okay, that chapter's slightly closing. The introduction of Ecstasy came along. There was suddenly that next wave of 16 to 18-year-olds that come along, and they kind of want their soundtrack, and it's all kind of a bit more dance and a bit more Manchester. And like I said, Ecstasy kind of changes things a bit as well.
Totally, yeah.
So and also there's another decade, and often that feels a bit like, what's that all about? So when you came to do Chema Crazy, you'd also lost John at that stage. What was the kind of state of the band going into that kind of session?
Very good, actually, because I say to you, so we had the end of millennium. So basically, the tail end of 1988. We had to cancel all the American shows because I was sick. Basically, I was still in the hospital. So a lot of gigs got cancelled, and then the American tour got rescheduled. I think it was March '89, and by then I was a bit better, and I was able to do it. And we got like so whenever John and Neil left, Damien came on the guitar. That was a great thing, a great move. It was just seamless, and it was great for me. Like, me and Damien just clicked playing together as well. And then I got my friend John Marchini in, who actually played in the Cassandra Complex with Rodney. He was Rodney's friend. So there's a link there. Because Rodney was at the same university as me, actually. But I always thought he was a bit pretentious. We used to kind of make fun of him. I mean, it was easy to poke fun at him because he used to dress up like a kind of gothic nun at one stage. I mean, he used to get beat up and stuff, because you can imagine what Northern Ireland,
that would be a hard look to pull off.
Oh yeah, but I mean, he's got, like, for some reason, Rodney's always had supreme confidence, so nothing was going to knock him down. But so John was actually in Germany. John was a really good friend of mine, but he'd gone to play in the Cassandra Complex. Then I asked him to join the Petrols on bass. So John, he was a great person to come into the Petrols at that stage, because he's a really lovely person, very easygoing and good fun and always smiling. So he was a perfect person to help the rest of us all rekindle our friendship. Because I mean, the band Petrols always has to work as friends first. We're not one of these bands where people, they don't really get on, and it's just a kind of thing, like work or whatever. We're a very kind of close unit. Even the four of us, the four Irish members of that Petrol Emotion still very close. I mean, Steve, we're still close with Steve, but obviously he lives in America.
Yes.
So we got John Marquini in, so that really helped. And then Kieran and myself had written like 5 really good songs each, and Damien had 2 or 3. They had 3 as well. So we had good, we had really good, strong material again. Everybody was getting excited. So when we went to do that American turn '89, it was a real balm for us. We reconnected as friends. We were having real fun. The gigs were great in America. Fans were going crazy. So then we got Scott Litt. He was going to do the record, and we went to Los Angeles to make Chemi Crazy. So that was a really great time again, because we'd been through the kind of mill and we'd come out the other end, and it was looking really rosy again. So we went and made Chemi Crazy, and we thought, we tried to make this really, like Virgin wanted a commercial record. So we kind of let them make this very sort of radio-friendly record, and then it didn't sort of do the business either. It appeared, people love the record, and we did all the remixes and stuff, and that was all really got loads of good press and stuff, but just didn't sell anything again. So that was kind of very difficult after Chemi Crazy wasn't a hit. But then we got up for Fireproof again, and we wrote better songs again. But then the reception to that, we'd kind of run our course. It was just, I think it was just in this country. Anywhere else, like France, we were starting to do really, really well in France, and we always did quite well in America. So we should have, instead of, we were so disheartened by the response to Fireproof, even though it was number 1 in the independent charts. But it kind of, about 4 months after it had been put out, it was basically dead in the water. There was nothing we could do with it anymore. And what we should have done was taken some time off, because we'd basically been going for like nearly 10 years.
Yes.
But then there was an Australia tour was booked, so we were really excited about that. And everybody was up for that again. And then that got cancelled at the 11th hour, literally the night before we were supposed to go. The promoter was dodgy and the tickets didn't come through. And that just broke a few of us. And we decided to pack it in. But what we should have done was just take 6 months off and see how we felt then. It was, and I mean, I have this thing now. I think bands should never break up. You should just say, look, we're on hiatus, We might come back in 10 years' time. And most bands do, don't they? They come back after 10 years.
Yeah, because I can't think of it. But I know a few bands have sort of said, well, we've never said we broke up. We just haven't done anything for a long time.
That's very wise. That's wise, That's very wise.
And to be honest, it's interesting. You did have a change of personnel on Fireproof with...
Yeah, Brendan, John Marquini. Unfortunately, Scott Litt did a number on John Marquini. He just wrecked his confidence, his playing. So I think he just broke his spirit, really. He really put him through the mill. And
I've come across that with drummers. I've heard a few people say, bizarrely
some producers are terrible like that.
And bizarrely, they were kind of women drummers who just said, they just kept making me do the same thing until I was destroyed. And then they just got a session musician in and done it for me. But by then they'd hit the hard drugs and, had left, it really did hurt them huge.
I mean, unfortunately, whenever the digital technology came in, like producers just became completely anal, and they threw out all these great techniques that had been used to make all your favorite records in the 60s and 70s, and what they were doing was, because I mean, like Manic Pop Thrill was a joy to make because it was done quickly. We were all in the same room. Basically, Hugh Jones, can't say enough good things about him. It was my favorite experience ever being in the studio. It was my first time properly in the studio with him.
Yeah,
and he made everything a joy. It was a joy to be playing. He encouraged everybody. He had great ideas, and it was all done quickly. And we were all in the same room and stuff. And then when we went to do Babel, it was the opposite. Rolly was this drummer, and he was into the technology, and we kind of did. That's why we wanted to work with him. We wanted that kind of thing in our music. But what he did do was that you would do your stuff by yourself. So you're out in the studio playing, everybody's in the control room, you can't hear what they're saying, and you feel really self-conscious, and it's just not as nice. I mean, it's unless you're a kind of studio muso who you're happy to do that for 6-7 hours and play the same thing or whatever. But if you really feel like under that amount of scrutiny as well, I don't think you're ever going to play. You're not going to have the same feel as when you have people in the same room with you. So I can see, and then a lot of producers, they became really, I think, quite anal about drum sounds. You've heard stories about somebody doing a bloody snare sound for like 7 hours or whatever, and that happened with us as well. Just to get my nerves, you'd have a whole day, nothing would get done. They were just working on the snare. Do you know what I mean? And then you hear the record now and you think, well, it's not that great. It hasn't aged very well, has it? It sounds very much of that time. Whereas, you're still listening to records where, there was like one overhead mic for the whole band, like a Sun, like Elvis, early Elvis records or whatever. Like, why do they still sound so good? You know what I mean? It's like, so something's been lost. This marvelous technology, as good as what it is, I think people forget about the warmth and the spontaneity that gets lost a lot of time.
Yeah, well, the 80s mainstream production sound, that was that Trevor Horn moment, wasn't it? That suddenly, made it a very period piece. A lot of those songs that you hear now, it's like, oh God, that's quite great.
Yeah, that big gated snare, the kind of Phil Collins gated snare. It's just.
And there was that Tina Turner, Dire Straits, all those people that just, And I mean, though I quite liked ABC in places, I mean, there is something quite dated about that and Frankie's kind of sound as well. So it's a tricky number, isn't it? Yes, and there you go. So because actually you were just there between kind of, I suppose, a bit like the Seattle grunge scene and also Britpop when you sort of called it a day. And you would have probably been perfect for Britpop.
Yeah, we got caught up in the grunge thing a bit because Steve was, obviously Steve was really into the whole grunge thing. He loved all the sort of Seattle bands and stuff. That was where he was from. And we definitely got a bit heavier around that time. But because we weren't a part of it, we were always seen to be apart from it. We were never part of any scene really, to our detriment or credit. I don't know which it is, probably both.
Yes.
But then it was really funny because you think the whole time that we were going, guitar music was really not in vogue that much. Whereas as soon as we stopped, Britpop happened.
Yes.
And I always think, but I think if we had continued, we wouldn't have had any association with Britpop. Obviously, I wonder what would have happened. Actually, would we have been reconsidered? I don't know. It's hard to say, really. But I would say we influenced. I know for a fact that we influenced Blur and Radiohead. That's just two.
Yeah. Well, also, I think
what do you call them? The Manic Street Preachers always. They name check us, and so do the Super Furry Animals as well. There's 4 bands, that can always name check us.
Well, the thing is, all those people who were in those bands from that period would have gone to see you live.
Exactly, yeah.
So they would have been in the audience, and all those kind of C86. Because I don't, there's a book by Mickey from Lush. I mean, she often.
I just read it actually. Yeah.
Amazing amount of bands they would have seen, and I remember. Oh yeah, actually no, I didn't see that. I saw Steve once at a Butthole Surfers gig in London in the late 80s. I think he was hanging about for some reason.
Yeah, he would have been going to all those gigs. Man, I never really liked the Butthole Surfers, but I know he would have been at those gigs. I mean, we did. I mean, I used to go out. God, I'd be out virtually every night. And then when you're in the band, you knew promoters, and then you could always get free tickets usually as well.
Yeah,
I saw Nirvana when they played.
With that Tad.
Where?
Did you see them when they were supporting Tad on the Bleach tour?
No, I didn't see them. I saw them. I saw them when they were just promoting, starting to promote Nevermind. So they played at what do you call the venue on the West End near Oxford Street?
Oh, I don't know. But I remember
it's knocked down now. But I mean, it was one of those gigs where it was like medium. So it was maybe 1,800 people there. And we went to see them, and it was really good. It was like just seeing another gig. But inside about another 10 weeks, then they just every week they were selling millions and millions more. And then by the end of another 10 weeks, that's when all the craziness started. Then, so we just saw them when they were just really, really good. If you know.
Yeah. Well, there
was no craziness yet.
Because they came to Norwich, they were at the Arts Centre supporting Tad in '89. Right. Then they came to the waterfront at the in Norwich, there as well, and they didn't even sell out there, and it was not even 500 people. Wow. And the promoter, who thought this is going to be amazing, lost so much money. But
Really? Wow.
A few months later, the album would have hit and they would have been absolutely huge. But it was just timing. So I remember his story that he didn't even, because he knew he'd lost so much money, he didn't even watch the band. He sat by the river watching the ducks and feeling like his life had, because it was just like timing. It was just like, that venue only holds 500 people and they didn't even.
Oh my God. Because I saw them, it was the Astoria, and I remember, do you remember the Astoria?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's where they played, and that's where all the other, all the American bands coming over.
I guess they would have had
that was a step up from the smaller gigs, obviously.
Yeah, they would have had L7, wouldn't they? And Jacob's Mouse supporting them at that stage.
I can't remember the support, but yeah, you're probably right. Yeah, you're probably right. But it was really funny seeing them, and they, they just came on and they played and they were really good. I really liked Nevermind. I went out and bought it. Loved it. And it was just so funny to see how it blew up so quickly after that.
Yes, I would have never. When John Peel, he was playing this compilation in the late 80s called Sub Pop 100. It was just one of those kind, and it was great. It was like, there was some good stuff on there. But I would have put money that none of those bands would have made it.
Well,
and then Nirvana obviously did.
Yeah.
But yes. But look, coming to then what we all love at a certain age, archiving, Demon Records. When did the idea come to do this amazing anthology, the 10 years of the band, which came out actually just a month ago, which was 121 tracks, 7 CD box set. This is quite something. So when did this kind of idea come into people's consciousness?
We'd kind of given up thinking it was ever going to happen, because it was for a long time it was a licensing nightmare because of all the different labels.
Oh yes, yeah, that's true.
So that made it really difficult. So that's why it had excuse me, that's why it didn't happen before now. And then a few years ago now, I think all the majors, they must have decided, like, we've got all this stuff in the archives, let's just cut our price for, so basically I think now if you say you wanted to put out some record that was owned by Phonogram in the 80s or whatever, you could license it now for about £1,000, I think, something like that. It's pretty right. It's not as expensive anymore. But there's this guy, Michael, I'm going to forget his bloody surname, this Irish guy, and he basically sent us an email just before COVID saying, I'm really interested in getting a compilation together. I mean, he's not actually affiliated to any label, but obviously he's in contact with them. So he got in contact, and we were like, yeah, we'd obviously love that. And then we didn't hear from him, from like a year and a half. And then he came back and he said, I've got a Demon are interested in putting it out, And so obviously Demon own Manic Pop Thrill. They have the rights to that. So, and we own Fireproof, and we own the live record, Final Flame as well. So there's 3. So they only had to go and license 3 other ones. And so we did a deal with Damien, and then me and Damien worked with Tony, the artist who basically did all the artwork. We worked in tandem with him on the getting the booklet together, and Damien, they took the music and they remastered it, so it sounds really, really good. So we had to then pick the tracks and stuff. So it was quite a lot of work in a way, but it was good fun doing it as well. Me and Damien had good fun doing it.
Yes. And was it nice for the band? Nice being a bit odd, but was it nice to sort of have that kind of creative project again with this group of people that you'd
well, it was just me and Damien. The rest of them weren't. Well, Steve's in another continent, so that makes things difficult. But Kieran wasn't that fussed. Brendan, I think Brendan felt because he was only in the sort of later part of the band that he couldn't have such a big say in it. So Kieran's quite happy for me and Damien to do everything,
And what about John?
John, like we're friends. I'm still friends with John, but I mean, John lives in Derry, and he sort of hasn't. He's not washed his hands of the Petrols, but he's not really interested in kind of taking part in anything really. Do you know what I mean? Because we've done these things online, like talking about each album. I don't know if you've seen it.
Oh,
if you go to petrolemotion.com, they're really good actually, because people people in the band are engaging and they're funny, and we still, there's a lot of camaraderie there, so it's a good fun. And we talk about making of each record and what we liked and what we didn't like, blah blah blah. So they've been good fun. So we kind of done all that. So this felt like the natural extension then, to put out the box set. So it seems like a good time. So I'm still waiting to I'm hopeful it will get a bit more publicity. But
yes,
there's going to be a big article now in Record Collector next month, like quite a big feature on that. So I'm looking forward to seeing that. The guy who did it, David, is a really nice guy. We got on really well with him. Excellent. So I'm hoping that it won't just sort of die away. But I mean, obviously, the best thing to do would be to kind of do some gigs to support it. But it just makes things really difficult with Steve being in America. And then Kieran, the drummer, he's not sure. Like I'm 61 now. Kieran's worried that, because it's heavy duty music. A lot of it, it's difficult to play. It's strenuous and it's very physical. And he's not sure he's up to it anymore. He's had some health issues over the years. So I think there is that we maybe will do some shows, but we'll maybe scale it down a bit. I mean, maybe kind of go more to the sort of pop side and the ballady side. I would kind of like to do that, because a lot of times there's so much energy in our live shows that it was very difficult to do the slow songs, because everybody was pumped up and hyped up.
Yes.
To do the slow songs, you have to be, you have to kind of bring it down. It has to be more chilled out and whatever. And a lot of times we just couldn't do it. You're lucky to get one sort of slow song. Whereas I'm listening to the box set again, obviously there's a lot of little jams there. We're on B-sides or third track or whatever. Stuff like the actual song "Chemi Crazy" as well, which is kind of one of the sort of a fan favorite now, and it was only like a B-side.
Yeah, it's a tricky one, isn't it? Yeah, because it's nice to see, it's nice to see a band sort of still playing live, but I realised that it's not just a case of doing 2 rehearsals and then turning up and it all sounding okay. And
because just getting, even when we were like, when we got together and when we reformed 2008, it's like Steve has to come over from America, he paid for the flights, and then we had to get, there's a lot of kind of incidentals, and there's not much, at the end of it, there wasn't much money left to pay ourselves, so we didn't really, I think any money that we made individually on that reunion tour was used for the flights then, because we did a couple of shows in America at the tail end, and so that paid for the flights and your hotels, whatever. Do you know what I mean? So it was like, no, it wasn't for money that we reformed,
No, I guess you just need a few festival dates, though that's probably a bit too big.
We probably could, but it would have to be worth your while, obviously. Yeah. And everybody would have to be free. Everybody's got like jobs and families and stuff as well. I mean, Damien's still playing with the Undertones as well, so that makes things tricky as well, just not tying in with their dates as well.
God, it is tricky, isn't it? I know. It's interesting. There's a few bands I've speaking to. I think it's somebody from the Dance Society, where a few of them are all getting together next month in January to do to do some new material. But I think everyone has that tight schedule that they all have to let's put 2 weeks off work and really, try and get something together. So it's quite tricky. So after the band then finished in sort of the mid-90s, what do you then navigate yourself through, the next period of life? Because obviously it's like, oh, that's interesting. I've got to
because like a couple of days after the last ever show that we did, which would have been the end of May 1994, I got married in early June, and then I got a job in this radio PR company where I was being I would have been the guy doing the sort of snappy slogans.
Right. Yeah.
So I was in an office for 6 months, and I really didn't like it, And then at the end of that year, Damien persuaded me to start another band again. So me and him joined forces, and we wrote these songs. We were called the Wave Walkers, and we nearly got a deal with Nude Records. Yeah. But then they got into financial trouble, I think, and that didn't happen, and it just kind of fizzled out. Like Damien was going through a divorce at the time, and his attention was kind of not all over the shop, and I I was working and then coming home and writing songs and rehearsing and stuff, and I was just exhausted as well. So that kind of unfortunately kind of came to an end. But then I started doing some acoustic gigs with Kieran as well. So I was always writing songs. In fact, I would say I've written my best songs after the Petrels broke up. I really had a purple patch after we broke up, which seems very ironic and very Petrels as well. Sort of the way our luck went.
Yes.
And then so then we reformed in 2008, and everybody got excited again. And Steve had kind of instigated it, and then we all got excited, and we were actually talking about recording again and stuff. And then his wife fell pregnant, and then he decided he didn't want to do it anymore. So we were like, oh, really? So the four of us, the four Irish members of the last lineup, the Petrels, we formed this band called the Everlasting Yeah. And we made so we rehearsed, and I did most of the singing, and we jammed a lot of stuff, and we were playing gigs about 2011, 12,
Yeah.
13. And then we made a record called Anima Rising, which I'm very proud of. Probably my favorite thing of everything I've ever done, actually. That was going quite well, and then like two of the band members had real health issues, one very, very serious. So we basically had to take a break for that. And then we got back together, and we were doing the follow-up to Anima Rising, and we went to the studio January 2020, and we did 3 songs, which are 90% finished. And then COVID happened, so I put the mockers on that as well. So we've just been plagued by sort of bad luck. But
Yes.
I'm hoping next year to get a lot of stuff out. We're hoping to do this second Everlasting Yeah record, and then I'm going to do a solo project as well. I've got loads of material. So instead of waiting and trying to find people, I'm just going to put them out as demos, and people will know they're demos. But hopefully I'll get enough interest that I can get some people to play with together and go and do them properly or do something else. So I just want to get playing again next year. Basically, I really miss it.
Yeah. Oh God, that sounds amazing. Yeah. I mean, if you could have whispered something to your 16-year-old self starting out, is there anything in particular you might have just said, just a bit of wisdom or advice or direction?
It's hard to say, really, because as I said to you, when I was like 22, before I sort of started playing music seriously, I kind of thought I'd missed the boat, really, So in a way, everything's been a boon. But what I think is, I like whenever the Petrels broke up, I should have really tried harder with the Wave Walkers to make things work. But I think it was just weird, because whenever you're in your early 30s and you're married and you're not going out as much anymore, so you don't know the same people that you did. Like I knew quite a lot of people when I was in the Petrels and single and going out all the time. Like we knew quite a lot of people and quite a lot of the movers and shakers as well. Whereas a few years later, I didn't really know. A lot of people had moved on, and you didn't really know people anymore.
Yeah.
I just wished I'd been more single-minded instead of thinking, because the thing about it is, what I would say to anybody is, if you're doing a music project, and then it stops, it's really hard to get up for the next one again. It's just energy-wise, it's so difficult, because when you're in your early 20s and you're single and you don't have really any responsibilities, you can get away with a lot more stuff,
Yeah, it's interesting.
I had to after the Wave Walkers, I took a job with BT. I worked for BT for about 10 years doing different projects, because you had like mobile phones, and then you had the internet and stuff. So I was involved with that, and then I've been a translator then for like the last 12 years. So that was my degree, was in French, and I lived in France for a while. So I translate French, Spanish, Portuguese, and Italian. That's my job now at the minute. But that's kind of going by the wayside, just with the internet and with machine translation and stuff. Now it's very hard to get people to pay us properly, because a lot of people, they just won't pay for quality.
Yeah,
it's becoming more difficult, and there's a lot of scammers as well. People looking for translation, they go online, and it's very easy to scam them as well. So I'm ready to kind of go out. I mean, it's been good to be able to work from home and stuff, but I kind of fancy getting out into the world again. So that's what I want to do.
Blimey, God, it's interesting, isn't it? Having to sort of navigate these things. It's always It's,
See, that's it. I have to provide. First of all, I always have to sort of provide for my family, so that's your first consideration, really.
yes, absolutely. That's amazing. But look, yeah, actually, I just remember when you were talking about that, putting stuff out, because I did an interview with Kev. I think his name's Hooper.
Yeah, from Stomp, he's a good friend of mine.
But yeah, he's on Dimple Disc, but he's got that solo album. And again, it's that thing of like, well, I can make all this music, but I'm not sure if, who's out there who's going to want to engage with
Kev
it.
is very productive. I mean, Kev's been very productive, and he's a good painter as well. I actually bought one of his paintings there just before last year, and it was obviously I like his painting, but it kind of helped him as well because I think he was getting frustrated because he'd basically taken a sabbatical from his job, so he was devoting himself full time to doing the painting and doing the music, whatever. But I think with his music, because it's not totally accessible. It's anybody listens to kind of top 40, whatever. I think they'll find it quite a challenge and listen. So I understand that, but at least he's got the label and he's got the opportunity to get it out there at least.
Yeah.
Whereas
good.
I've kept thinking, oh, I've got to wait until this is kind of perfect. Whereas now I'm just like, look, a lot of stuff's demos, but you can, it's still quite good. I'm quite proud of it. So I'll put it out and see what kind of reaction you get, and then hopefully it'll help me to get some other like-minded souls to play with as well.
Yeah, I'm sure. And actually, I think it will be kind of a bit of not a slow burner, but I think people will start picking up on the box set once this.
I hope so. Yeah, it would be nice. I mean, I was very disappointed. Like Mojo did a piece, and I think it was maybe 70, 80 words. How can you sum up a 7 CD box set in such a limited amount of words, And the thing about it is we've never had any kind of feature in that magazine. They've never done anything with us. And you see some of the people that get in there, and I'm just like, is there some kind of, you do start, I mean, I'm not a paranoid person, but you start thinking, what is the problem? The Petrols is a great story as well, if you want to tell the story.
Yes. Well, actually, it's interesting because I did look at the latest record collector and I was just amazed they had so many big, I just think magazines that survive, I think, do big articles on really not completely obscure, but quite obscure artists and bands or books. And I think that's where people become quite committed. Whereas magazines, I remember Q magazine was just, I didn't like Q. And Mojo and Uncut aren't as quite,
Yeah, I mean Mojo now. I mean, like I stopped subscribing years ago because they're just they're just reprinting the same thing. I mean, how many Beatles? I mean, how many Beatles anecdotes? I mean, half the things that they put on, the story, you know how it goes. It's like who wants to hear this again, So and then they do that thing where they'll review all these obscure American records. They give like 30, 40 words to each one. It's like, well, what's going to make me listen to any of these? Do you know what I mean? I think we're it used to be when we were growing up, there wasn't such a huge amount of choice, and it was all the better for it.
Yeah,
I think now that the amount of stuff that's been put out, it's just quite frightening. I would hate to be they have to listen. I mean, imagine it was your job to listen every week and try and find the gems. I mean, because I think if you listen to music and you hear a lot of mediocre or bad music, it'll put you off the good stuff almost in a way.
Yeah,
it's very hard to kind of keep your attention.
I kind of missed John Peel because he was the person that
I
kind of trusted his kind of, he'd curate his show, wouldn't he? And I kind of felt like he would have got the best reggae record, the best rap record, the best indie, the best Bulgarian folk, the best African.
Definitely.
And just kind of put it on one show. So you thought, that's interesting. Even if I didn't really want to go and buy it, I thought at least I've heard probably what I think he would consider to be the best record. So
no, totally. I mean, his show. I mean, I would say from 76 to 79. I think once I went to university, I just didn't listen to him so much. Not because I didn't like him, but just because you were busy doing other stuff, And then I came back to him about 83 or so again, and listened to him then for a good few years then after that as well. So yeah, and I mean, you could just tell that he loved what he was doing, and he would give things a chance as well.
Yes, I know. I used to like John Waters used to say, John Waters, the producer, he would say, John Peel would probably listen to those records at home, whereas John Waters said, I would often like the idea of the record and think it should get heard, but I probably wouldn't go home and play it, whereas John Peel probably did.
Yeah.
And I kind of thought that was probably true. And he also said, if John Peel ever reaches puberty, we're all in trouble. And he did have that kind of ear of a 16-year-old that, you know, he's like, God, I just want to hear that, you know, and play it to death, you know, and then hear the next thing. And I think that's also kind of quite true, really. So
no, I mean, but you think about it, I mean, there was nobody else like John Peel, really. I mean, on Radio 1, the closest to John Peel was maybe who would have been the closest to John Peel?
There was Kid Jensen and Janice Long, who
Kid Jensen and Janice Long would have been the two, really. And then,
but then
Mark Goodyear, maybe.
Tommy Vance on a Friday night, heavy metal.
Yeah, well, you know, the thing about the heavy metal is you have to really take your hat off to the heavy metal people. They're so loyal actually to their groups as well. You know, if one of them makes a record that's not that great, they're like, oh well, there's always the next one. Do you know what I mean? It's like,
yes.
Whereas, you know, the kind of hipsters, they're like, oh, you know, if some band has two good records and a dodgy one, they've just kind of completely forgotten about them and they're disdainful, and you know, they'll ruin their confidence as well. Most, you know, because that's the thing. People, these critics, I mean, I think it's really sad that the music press had to die, but I think at one stage they had far too much power. And I mean, you know, some new bands starting off, they were just kind of crucifying them immediately before they'd even done anything. So if you think like some of the best music that I think that's come out the last 20, 25 years or whatever, is stuff where it's been allowed to grow away from the limelight. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, you think about, I'm thinking specifically now, bands mid to late 90s, you know, they were crucified, you know, after 3 gigs or whatever, if they weren't measuring up to whatever the critics should be.
But then you get people like, I think it was the Soup Dragons, who were like, you know, giving like, this is the best band ever. And I think they'd only put out 1 single, or not even a single. It was like, they kind of was a bit weird. They were a bit they're a bit sort of schizophrenic, weren't they? The music press at times. They
were just desperate. They were always desperate to get the next big thing. You know, because they were weekly, it had to be weekly as well. Because I mean, you know, we obviously had our kind of moment with the press, and then I remember like the Enemy did a review of End of the Millennium Psychosis Blues, and they give it 8 stars out of 10, which you think, well, that's good. But the review read like a death notice almost, you know, like it was the death of the band. It was just so bizarre. I remember reading it and thinking, you know, we haven't broken up. What is this review? You know, it's just bizarre.
Yes, this is true.
They were kind of second guessing, you know, because, you know, they didn't really understand what we were trying to do. I mean, I think people have a better idea now because, as you say, once, because we were on the kind of dance thing early, and we weren't even that, you know, we were like, Big Decision was kind of influenced by dance, but not that much, not that many other of our songs were dance orientated, you know. It was still pretty much like kind of straight ahead. Like our thing really, if you think about the Petrols, our 2 main influences were the Beatles and the Stones still, really. You know, melody, we wanted melody and energy, and you know, we wanted memorable as well. You know, we didn't want to be avant-garde. I mean, we liked Pere Ubu, but we liked the kind of poppier stuff of Pere Ubu. We weren't trying to do the more outre stuff. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, absolutely. No, it's interesting.
We wanted to be popular. I'm always disappointed we're not played more on Radio 6. You know, it's always the same 2 songs that they seem to play. And you think now there's 121 songs there, and they probably still play the same 2 songs as well.
Yeah, no, it has been great to get the box set, actually, because it does give you a kind of an idea of the depth of the band and the progress and the transition between one and the other. So it's been, you know, it's kind of interesting actually on that front.
And then, you know, the booklet as well, because, you know, we were always portrayed as these kind of politicos as well, which is not true at all. I mean, obviously we did talk about politics, and that was important to us. But, you know, whenever we were out together, we weren't sitting around talking about politics. We were out having a good time, you know?
Yes, absolutely.
So that's why I really like the booklet. You know, it's got a lot of Damien's photographs of that time, you know, and they're just great. You can see how much we were young and enjoying ourselves and smiling and having fun, you know. It's not sitting around.
And also you get John Harris to do the sleeve notes as well.
Yeah, that was a lovely turn of events. It's actually all down to Phil Wilson's wife, Pam. So
Okay.
Pam she's a kind of counsellor down in Buckfastleigh, where they live down the southwest.
Yes.
And she had met John through him doing an article on her becoming a counsellor, because she's really stirred things up down there. She's been really, really good. She's a very determined person and a very wonderful person. And she got talking to him, and we are still good friends with the Jim Brides. We were like, when we were going as a band, that the only other band really who I would go and see on a regular basis and be friends with was the Jim Brides for the time that they were going. And then John Hunter, for example, who's the trumpet player, he worked with the Petrols for years. He was our driver and roadie and stuff as well.
Oh, excellent.
So Pam knew John Harris, and so whenever the time came to do the booklet, I was going to write an essay, and then I thought, no, I'm not writing anymore about the band. I want somebody else to do this. So I thought I'll ask the fans. So I put a thing on Facebook asking the fans to write something, and I was going to compile the best of what they wrote. So apparently Pam saw this, and she got in contact with me. She knew that John Harris was a Petrols fan. If you look at John Harris's Twitter, he's got the photograph of us with the glasses, the writing on it. That's his Twitter picture. He was a big fan. So Pam said to me, look, John Harris is a big fan. Why don't you ask him? Why don't you ask him to do the notes? And I was like, okay, I will. And I got in contact with him, and he was really up for it, And so he did them, and he did such a fantastic job. Because he was kind of, he was sort of because of the space on the booklet, he was told it was only going to be a certain amount of words. And I thought, I would hate somebody telling me, it's got to be 2,000 words or whatever it is, because that would really restrict me. But he loved it, because he's used to doing it for the Guardian. Obviously, his piece has to be a certain length, and he just managed to get everything in as well. It was just extraordinary. So we're hoping to meet him. So obviously he got a box set. He actually got paid now by Edsel as well. Got him some money, but I'm going to meet up with him. He's going to come and meet the band when the next time he's up in London. We're all going to go out for a meal, because I really love his writing and his journalism. He's just one of those people who he seems to have common sense, which is not that common, obviously.
No, and I loved he did a book on Brit pop as well, which I thought was...
Yeah, he did. I must get hold of that, actually, because I've never read it. I read the Creation one. I read David Kavanagh's one about creation. Right,
and but no, John's done a really good one, which captured a period in the 90s. So
he's a great writer. Yeah, he's just a really straightforward person as well. That's what I really liked about him. And then we did another one of these online things, and he hosted the last one, actually.
Excellent. God,
that was good. So he's had some kind of interaction with us as well. But yeah, we were really happy to get him to do it, and to do such a good job. I think I got really emotional, actually, when I read his slave notes. I just thought, that's just perfect. Nobody could have done a better job than that. That's just fantastic.
Nice. Well, look, this has been fantastic. And if you want, I can always send you the link to this, and then you can always post it if you want.
I will. Of course I will. Yeah, of course I'll post it everywhere for you. Yeah.
But but thank you for your time. This has been amazing.
My pleasure to meet you. Thank you very much indeed.
And take care. And
you too.
All the best from you. See you later. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Indeed, that's just rock and roll finishing there. I know, I loved leaving that last bit in, but massive thank you to Raymond Gorman from That Petrol Emotion for giving me the time for that interview. As I mentioned earlier, it's a 7 CD box set that's come out on Demon Records, That Petrol Emotion. It is absolutely brilliant, and if there's records or albums that you missed the first time, they sound amazing the second. So, yes, do check it out. And I think they've got a Facebook page and a website as well. So do sign up, and hopefully we'll be hearing more from them throughout the year. This has been the C86 Show. If you want to contact me, you can on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Just do C86 Show. Keep it positive and groovy. And also, all these have been archived, these interviews. So you can find those on Spotify, iTunes, Podbean. It's true. Anyway, have a great week. Stay safe.